I want to talk about how we got here today via today's pop psychology. As a society, we tend to focus almost exclusively on the mind in terms of creating our reality rather than on our emotions. Much of the information I'm going to share today was assembled by Scott Killaby using AI. It all began with James Allen's book, As a Man Thinketh, and he wrote that in 1903. This book gained significant traction in the self-help movement and became a popular philosophical text, particularly among those who were interested in personal development and positive thinking. At the same time in history, Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams, which was written in 1900, was met with extreme skepticism and did not achieve popularity for quite some time. While Allen's work resonated with a broader audience seeking practical self-improvement, Freud's ideas were more specialized and grounded in clinical psychology. This self-help genre of book writing skyrocketed in the early 1900s and onwards. That is, self-help books that focused on positive thinking and self-improvement, not emotional repression. And some of these books included The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, which was written in 1910, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which was written in 1937, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, which was published in 1952. You can probably tell in listening to the names of these books how a lot of these philosophical ideas have infiltrated into our culture by and large. And you can already see America's focus on the almighty dollar here rather than on actual well-being in these books. And how we equate money with well-being will be perhaps a video for another day. They are related, that is, well-being and our ability to create abundance in some way. But I think perhaps not so much as today's New Age culture would have us believe. As we can see, these self-help works tended to focus on mindset and success rather than the psychological underpinnings of emotional suffering, which I believe in my own experience is the cause of most of our sabotage and our suffering to begin with. Freud's ideas on repression and the unconscious mind finally gained traction in the 1910s and 1920s, particularly among intellectual circles and within the growing psychoanalytical community, the field of which he was the founder. And yet it would still be several decades before Freud's work gained broader acceptance in mainstream psychology. By the 1930s and 1940s, Freud's theories were more widely recognized, though still they remained quite controversial. Some of the criticisms of Freud's theories emerged in the late 1920s and 1930s. These were behaviorists such as John B. Watson, who argued against the focus on internal thoughts and emotions. He suggested that observable behavior should be the primary focus of psychology. This criticism influenced the development of behaviorism and later cognitive behavioral approaches, which emphasized changing behavior rather than delving into repressed emotions. In my own experience with these more, I want to call them superficial modalities because they observe more what's on the exterior of a person, which is valid to some degree. But in my experience, they just simply do not address our issues at their root as much as the emotional repression work does. In their own fields, Freud and Carl Jung faced considerable resistance in promoting their ideas, and this was largely due to the societal norms that stigmatized discussions of sexuality, mental illness, and emotional processes. It was simply the Victorian era's emphasis on repression and propriety that made it challenging for their theories to gain acceptance among the general public. Freud and Jung, however, used various strategies to disseminate their ideas, including they established psychoanalytic societies, they published journals, and they trained new analysts. They also engaged in public speaking and writing that was accessible to lay audiences, which helped to gradually shift these perceptions that were widespread at the time against this type of work. Freud's work laid the groundwork for psychoanalysis, but the resistance to exploring repressed emotions led to the rise of alternative therapeutic approaches, as we know, such as behaviorism and cognitive therapy. These approaches focus more on observable behaviors and cognitive processes rather than delving into emotional repression, as I discussed. And I dare say that more than a century later, we are still struggling to see how emotional repression is tied to most of our suffering, as well as how to work with this insight in a practical way. It was the emergence of self-help literature that focused on positive thinking and practical strategies that took the spotlight from Freud's more introspective approach. In the end, the evolution of therapy was influenced by both the resistance to Freud's ideas and the growing interest in more pragmatic approaches to mental health. This led to the diverse landscape of psychological treatment that we see today. Still, though, emotional repression work has taken a back seat to most therapeutic models we use today. I am in no way a therapist, but have personally worked with many of these modalities in working with therapists in my life. In my view, the power of emotional repression work has been a huge bypass by this community and is why I coach people in this process. If you want to check out my weekly offerings or consult with me personally regarding this work, feel free to check out my website, which is jenfoxley.com. Thanks for listening.